We'd like to thank Lisa and Kantorowitz. It's to commemorate the yahrzeit of Lisa's mother, Lorraine Nathanson, from Alea Bat Arya Leib. Yahrzeit's today, so we do thank our sponsors. The Shamash Rabbi Aliyah.
Amen.
Amen.
Everyone got a seat. Okay, so before we begin, first of all, an apology for last week. What is? Thank you. Okay.
Don't want us to sick.
No, really not. So the question is, when do you get into the Hanukkah spirits? That's question number one. When can you have your first donuts? What's the mystery?
Black Friday.
Black Friday.
On sale.
So that's the question. So the reason I mention Hanukkah, is I want to throw a little piece of information that we're going to come back to at some point. And what's significant is the following. Although we've been taught correctly that we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days starting on the 25th of Kislev, Chafet Kislev, note several authorities that you should know that the day we merited to re-enter and regain control of the temple and began this process of a rededication, the day when this process began was actually the 24th of Kislev. Now, what happened on the 24th of Kislev? They come in and they realize that we have to start a rededication. They find oil, they light it that evening. So according to this approach, yes, they light on the 25th, and therefore we celebrate the 25th in the 8 days. But something significant is occurring on the 24th of Kislev. 24th of Kislev. So just keep that information in mind. And before we start our class, another point, which is an important one. We study Medrash a lot, Midrashim. Anyone that has ever turned to Rashi knows very well that what Rashi wants to do when he presents his commentary on Chumash is to go through all the rabbinic sources, all the Midrashim, find those that relate to the most basic meaning of the text and share that one with us. And as a result of the fact that Rashi's commentary became very popular, it is common for children to be very familiar with the commentary, the insight, the stories, the midrashim that are shared by Rashi. So for example, it is common for a very young child to know that when the daughter of Pharaoh noted the basket, right, that where we had the future receiver of the Torah floating in, right? We've mentioned the fact that there was a church in Memphis that had a sign, right? Don't be depressed. Even Moses was a basket case, right? So
He was in denial.
he was in denial. So every child is presented, every child is aware of the fact that the Midrash tells us that the daughter of Pharaoh saw the basket floating from a distance, was not able to reach it, but nevertheless, she stretched out her arm. And what happened? She was like one of the incredible four. What are they called? The Marvel? Any Marvel?
Plastic Man. Remember Plastic Man?
Plastic Man. Fantastic Four. That's what I was waiting for. She was like one of the Fantastic Four, and her arm stretched, and she was able to reach that which was way beyond her natural reach. So now comes the question: it's a midrash? Yes. Do we take that literally? Question number one. Why do we teach it to children, if so? Are we okay that children take it literally for the next 95 years? Is it problematic? Right? These are some significant questions that relate to Midrash. And the general approach is that they are important. We hope that the child matures enough to realize that, hey, this is supernatural. Now, God could do the supernatural. He's not limited. But if it's not spelled out in tradition, if it is not like the crossing of the sea or the 10 plagues, I'm not going to work with the supernatural, but rather believe that there's some kind of message there. Okay, that's how we study Midrash, that Midrashim should be studied. And it seems to be part of our tradition that we want the next generation to be familiar with them. But Jewish education should not end at age 6, 7, 8, 9, but rather should continue when there's more of a maturity, more of an appreciation of some kind of message that is being transmitted by the rabbi. So that's piece of information number one when it comes to Midrash. So what we have to do so far today is get back to the 24th of Kislev, number one, and number two, to talk about a specific Midrash and what it represents. But for that, we're going to turn to Parshas Vayeitzei, page 144. You ready?
Yeah.
Yaakov is on the run. Why is Yaakov on the run? He took the blessings from his brother. Okay? And we are told here in verse 11, the second verse of the Parsha, Vayifga b'makom, he encounters this makom. Makom. Now, Torah, in general, is very comfortable giving us names of locations. Right and left. Right and left. No, even locations we're not so familiar with. Kadesh, Shur, Elonei, Mamre, right? Shem. Names are given. But when you read this verse very, very carefully, you realize that something is happening here, something is being concealed. And he reaches a place. It's going to be called the place. And keep an eye how many times in one verse the author decides to call this location the place and not give us a name. So what happens is Yaakov reaches Bamakom. He encounters the Makom, the place. Vayalen Sham, and he goes ahead and he spent the night Kiva Hashemesh, due to the fact that the sun set. Beforehand, Vaikach me'avnei, he took from the stones of number two, Hamakom. Okay? And then he protects his head. Vayasem ra'ashotav, he protects his head. Vayikav b'makom hahu. Third time. Okay? So we're going to have to address here, why not just tell us the name of the place? Why call it the makom? We know the makom, we know the location. We've heard, we've been educated that we're talking about the Temple Mount. Fine. Give it a name. Right? Well, why are we concealing this information? Now, the next verse tells us that he has the well-known image of the ladder that has the angels making their way, ascending and descending. Kadosh Baruch Hu communicates with him and tells him, listen, you fear about your situation, you feel lost. Yaakov, we've talked in the past, has gone through a very difficult period of time. He felt lost to leave his home and leave under circumstances that are extremely agitating. Right? He probably blamed himself for what was taking place. We have the ability to deal with many situations, but when we blame ourselves for situations we're going through, that's extremely painful. That's overwhelming. So he's in a very dark place. In a dark place, and according to tradition, he establishes the prayer of night, the prayer of darkness, which is a prayer when we don't see things going right, we don't understand why there's suffering, we don't understand why there's difficulties, but yet we have the ability of communicating in faith, that we turn to a higher being and say, you know what, there must be a reason, we don't understand it. That's the prayer of Yaakov. He's in that state now. You know, after the Kriyat Shema every morning we say, Emet v'yatziv v'nachon v'kayam. We make many good statements of things are clear. There's truth. There's things that are established. There's a higher being. There's good in the world. That's the daytime. But at night, it's emet ve'emuna. You gotta have faith. There are moments that really drain us, right? Human condition is such that we go through those difficulties in our existence, but we have to have faith. We have to have this ability to say, you know what, I don't understand it, but there's good, there's reason, there's meaning, there's purpose in existence, and you go ahead and you find encouragement. And this is what Yaakov went through, especially if you take the rabbinic tradition that originally he did not even intend to stop there. He was in a dark place, but he did pray, and he establishes this incredible prayer, and he establishes for us an understanding how to look at the Temple Mount, how to look at that location that inspires us for eternity. Because the angels making their way up and down, you've heard different explanations, right? If there are angels that are there to protect him outside of Israel, different type of angels. but the most basic understanding is that we believe in a communication with the supernatural realm. We believe that there are things we do that go upward, good deeds, prayers, and we also believe that there's guidance from above, that ethics and right from wrong is not man-made, but rather it comes from above, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. The guidance to the world and ethics come from above. So those are the angels making their way up and down. Angels are not what the child would believe are these creatures with wings, but rather they are shluchav shel makom. They are messengers of the Almighty. They are messengers that we create when a person acts in a specific way or prays to the Creator. You are in essence creating angels. You're having an impact in the spiritual realm. We call that angels. And when God Almighty sends things down to the world as we know it, there are angels there as well. Fine. So he is very much encouraged after this encounter. He commits to build a tabernacle, a temple there, and the rest we do know, but I want to go back and focus on the makom. The makom. So now, what we have to understand is that this text and this information was provided to our ancestors in the wilderness. Okay, so let's go back to the wilderness. And we have a nation of slaves. They made their way out of Egypt. I have a feeling that if we would be shipped back 3,400 years ago and have to interact with our ancestors, we would be embarrassed. And just as sometimes you have a child that says to the mother, keep away. Like don't when I'm with my friends, right? Please don't say anything, right? I don't know if it's up to grandparents as well. Please don't say anything because I don't want you to embarrass me, right? So I have a feeling that if we would be shipped back to the wilderness and see our ancestors and have a conversation with them, we would be a little bit embarrassed. Why? They were very primitive. I don't think it was an intellectual group. And I think, and obviously I could blame the Egyptians, right, that you enslave a nation for decades upon decades. What do you expect them to be interested in, right? This is not a developing nation. It was a nation that was indeed a cherpa, busha, not people we will be proud of. What happened? I mean, Jews have done okay over the years. We've made some contributions, right? I think we have some great minds. Right? Some contributions, right? Look at the world out there.
The sum is huge.
The sum is huge indeed. So what happened? So I give credit to this book, by the way. I think our identity and our maturity and our intellectual development has to do with the fact that we were given this text and we've committed to understanding it, to studying it. And therefore we came from being a nation, we were called the Ve'at Aron Ve'ariyah. We were a naked nation, had nothing to show, right? But we experienced something and we've been putting effort for the past 34 centuries to develop ourselves, and thank God we've been doing okay. Now, those ancestors were suddenly introduced to many details of Bereshit, meaning, leaving Egypt, you would interview the average Jew, he would probably know about Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. And some of them would know the names of some of the tribes, they would obviously know the name of their tribe, because that's important. The other tribes a little bit less, right? Like today, you would go ahead and interact with a Hasidic Jew. So he would give you the name of all the Talmidim, all the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, and the next generation. You meet a Jew that is a Litvishe, a Misnaged, who'll tell you a little bit more about Rabbi Kveger and the Vilna Gaon and his disciples, but about the Chassidim a little bit less. So most probably it was about the same. The stories of where the ancestors were, right, and when they came down to Egypt or how, these are pieces of information that started trickling in and actually filled in eventually their story when they were hearing this book. So at Matan Torah, when they got the book of Bereshit, and they got sections of Shmot, and they started reading the Torah as we read it. It was not a complete work. One of the opinions in the Talmud is that the Torah was given to them megillot, meaning it was given to them sections. When did it become a complete book? Only after 40 years. But according to this opinion, there were sections that were given to them earlier, and they started hearing stories from Bereshit. And no doubt in my mind, Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them that specific names represent things, right? That there's a lot of significance in the detail. Beautiful. So overall, the goal of the experience post-Sinai was for the nation to learn about their history. However, there was one piece of information that the Almighty felt it is better if I conceal it from them. There's one piece of information the Almighty felt, das nicht, this I don't want them to know about. And explains Maimonides that that piece of information is where the eventual Bet HaMikdash is going to be constructed. He did not want the tribes to know it. Reason being, the tribes knew that they're going to be getting specific regions in Israel. Dan knew they're going to be most probably in Gush Dan and a little bit in the north. Right? Zvulun knew that they're going to have at least one section by the ocean. And Yehuda knew they're going to be to the south, Binyamin a little bit to the north of that, Yosef to the north of that, right? Naphtali not far from very. Every tribe knew more or less where they're going to be. But Almighty did not want them to know in what area will they eventually have the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, and it's very clear, Vayifga b'makom. Right? And when Moshe Rabbeinu taught this to the children of Israel, someone raise their name, please. Moshe Rabbeinu said, no, makom, it's a location. Yeah, but where? You don't need to know everything, right? You don't need to know everything, it's a location. Vayifga b'makom, vayasem Hashem v'eshkem b'makom.
But he knew it was somewhere between Beersheba and Haran, so they knew it wasn't up in the north.
Well, Haran is way north, Beersheba is way south. Yeah, they knew it somewhere in between Beersheba and Haran, but not more. In other words, they knew it somewhere in Israel. Specifics or what tribe, and also you have to realize they did not have maps, right? They didn't have Google, the Google app for maps to know exactly where locations are. It was very broad. It's not like today that we know. Right, even though Yerushalayim is sliced in the middle, there's some line there that if someone could hack Google, there's still a line from the 1967 border. I don't know if you know that in Israel. Right, so if anyone could hack in and move it, would be a chesed. But they didn't know this. They knew a general idea of what locations they're going to be getting.
Why did God not want to let them know? Because of jealousy?
Aha! Now comes the question.
That's the ikr.
Why?
That's the ikr. Jealousy of the tribe.
Jealousy, you say.
What do you mean? I didn't get it?
Okay. So this is the question. So what I have to tell you, number one, piece of information, number one, you need to know. And it's so obvious. It is so obvious. Vayifga b'makom, vayikach mavnei hamakom, hamakom, the location. And I think what he did tell them is that you should know this is the same location where Akedat Yitzchak took. Vayaret ha'makom mirachok. So it is a very important place where you don't need to know exactly. Somewhere in the land of Israel. Okay? Why, you ask? So now, it's time to introduce a midrash. A midrash. Okay? What's the midrash that every single child who comes home Friday night and shares it with the parents? It's a midrash that relates to Yaakov's pillow. Yaakov's pillow or Yaakov's head protection. Because the rabbis noticed that when he took a stone to protect his head as he rested, it says, Vaikach me'avnei hamakom. And you could read that as, Ulakach even achat. He took one stone from or that's the most basic reading. But the rabbinic reading is, Vaikach me'avnei hamakom. He took several stones from that location. But then, when he wakes up, we are told, Vaikach et ha'even asher sam merashotav. It seems to indicate that it was one stone. So what's the medrash that every single child learns? What happens?
Fight between the stones.
The fight between the stones. Okay, Yitchilu avanim merivot ze im ze, alai yaniach tzadik et rosho. That the stones, you took 12 of them, he puts his head, or surrounds it, or places his head on it, and all the stones, the Medrash tells us, and this shared by Rashi, want to have the privilege, the honor of having the head of Yaakov Avinu on the stone. So what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He united them. Welcome to a medrash. And then eventually, we hope the child asks the question, when was the last time you had stones fighting? Right? I've heard of people fighting, right? I've seen that, right? I've seen issues there. Everyone wants, but where do you find stones fighting? The child eventually is going to ask him. This is a question that should be asked, and obviously there's a message there. So the message relates to the following. Once upon a time there was a city called Yerushalayim, a city of the Yevusi, and it was located south of the Temple Mount of today in an area that is known as Ir David. So when you go to Israel, it's a worthwhile location to visit. I think almost every person in this room probably has been there. You make your way to Ir David, and this was the city in the days of David. Eventually, David makes a big purchase north of the city where there was a threshing floor. A nice threshing floor. Threshing floors were round, circular, because it could give you the opportunity to have your oxen to go in circular motion as you go ahead and process the grain into that which will turn into flour and eventually bread. And he decides to make the purchase, the big and significant purchase of that northern threshing floor, which eventually turns into the temple. Who did he buy it from? A fellow by the name of Aravna. Aravna. How much did he pay? So here you're going to have to listen carefully, because I'm going to quote two sources, okay? And now you can know the right price. Source number one appears at the end of the book of Shmuel. Vayomer HaMelech el Aravna. The king says to Aravna, you know what, I'm going to pay. Don't try to give it to me for free. It seems to be that all these people want to give it to Jews for free, but deep down they really want to get paid. It happened in Hebron, and it happens now with this location north of the city of Jerusalem. So we are told that eventually Vayiken David et Hagoren, David purchases the threshing floor, Bekesef, and here we go, this is the price. If you ever wonder about real estate in the Middle East in those days, Bekesef Shkalim Chamishim. 50 shekel. Not bad, not bad. Right, today, what yeah, I'm worth a little bit more. Okay, that would settle the issue. However, we're going to turn to the book of Chronicles that records the exact same event, but there's some details that are different there. Vaiten David la'arnan, his name, the name of the seller changes a touch, but that we're fine with for now. And we are told, Mishkal, what were the values of these shkalim? Mishkal sheshmeot. 50 or 600. A little bit of a discrepancy there.
Inflation.
Well, inflation, you say. Well,
By the time
the currency
came around, it was...
okay, so it could be the currency. Now,
Yeah.
the truth is the shkalim that we do find later on that they added 20% to the weight of shkalim, but it seems to be things were consistent more at that time. The rabbis and the Talmud struggle with this question. Is it 50 or is it 600? Right? What does the number 50? 50 is like a half a unit. What does it relate to, a half a unit? And remember, David HaMelech did not pay out of his pocket, but rather he collected it from the people of Israel. He collected it all from the people of Israel, and it's a half of a complete unit, a half of 100. So a little bit similar to Machatzis HaShekel a little bit. Agree? What does 600 relate to? 600 is like a complete number of the people of Israel. We talk about 600,000. Okay, so we could work with these numbers, but the contradiction is a real one. So comes the Talmud, and the Talmud tells us the following. This is one of the opinions presented. Ha-ketzad, how do we work this out? So we are told, Goveh mikol shevet v'shevet chamishim, shehed sheshmeot. So what's the Talmud tell us? David HaMelech goes to one tribe, comes to the tribe of Naphtali, and he says, listen here, we're going to be building a temple, and I need this location to be owned by the people of Israel, that no one should ever challenge our right over the Temple Mount, right? Imagine if he wouldn't have done it. So now he turns to the tribe of Naphtali and he says, now you guys, I want you to be full participants. You're giving 50 shekel. Yeah, and it's going to be your temple, Naphtali. You could come there. It's your home. When eventually it will be built, you could treat it and feel like it's your home. Fine, he does it for Naphtali, he does it for Dan, he does it for Gad, he does it for Asher, and the grand total is 600. Fine. Now, there's an idea here. There's a very significant, more than just feeling it's yours. We know very well that when it comes to our people, we are a diverse nation. We're very, very diverse. And sometimes when you have to interact with people that are from a different way of thinking, a different approach to Judaism, you either could be extremely agitated, right, or you could be inspired, right? Sometimes it's both together. In other words, if let's say I could imagine one's getting on a long flight to Israel, right? A long flight to Israel, and you sit down. I haven't been. It's been some time since I've been there, but what I do remember sometimes is getting on the plane and looking at that seat and thinking to myself, 11 hours in this. Like in other words, that does come to mind. Now imagine after sitting down, right, on your seat, and you think, okay, acceptance. I'm going to be sitting here for the next 11 hours. Suddenly a group of 75 Breslivers come, right, and they are all around me, and they're happy, they're always happy, and they're dancing, and they're singing songs, and I could deal with it for 5-10 minutes, right? So imagine that. So now, in no way am I minimizing their contribution to Judaism, right? Imagine if everyone would be like me, how depressing the Jewish world would be, right? All these thinkers. But here you need to have people that are spirited, that are happy, that encourage others to feel Jewish unity. We have a need to have different type of Jews. No question about it. Okay? When it comes to the passion of the Chassidim, imagine the Jewish world without them. Right? Imagine if the Lithuanians would have been successful, right, and put an end to the development of that movement, it would have been a destruction. Because we've been it could be a very depressing nation, right? Because it's a group of Litvisha, the only thing they could celebrate is Tisha B'Av, meaning they only feel natural when things are depressed and dry, right? You tell me, you need to have people with passion. This past weekend, our son Moshe updated us that he's in Yerushalayim in Yeshiva, and he was going for Shabbos back to his old yeshiva to Kerem B'Yavne. So he had to go through Mea Shearim, so he's very careful to put on his headphones right beforehand, right? And put on, I don't know if it's music or a shir, and to detach himself from the world around him. And that's how he walks through the streets of Yerushalayim in his own world. Fine. He's ready to get on this bus, and he hears in back of him someone yelling, "Tzaddik, tzaddik," trying to get his attention. So he obviously is in his own world. He ignores the person calling, and he makes his way onto the bus. The next thing he knows is that person that's calling out "Tzaddik, tzaddik" is chasing him. And he looks back, and he sees a Jew, a Frum Yid, Talis and Tefillin, meaning he's still davening Shabbos, I don't know what time it was, chasing after Moshe with a pair of socks. What happened was that Moshe left his backpack that he was carrying a touch open. A pair of socks fell out. For the Hasidic Yid, the mitzvah of returning an object, he did it with passion. He went on the bus. He didn't need to get on the bus, but he has to do a mitzvah of Hashavas Aved. He has to return the lost object.
He put on his tefillin in order to do the mitzvah.
That's possible as well. So he runs, and then after he hands the pair of socks back, and obviously Moshe is very grateful, he starts thinking, okay, now, where am I going? Right? Now what? Now that is a contribution to Judaism, that you have people that are passionate about doing their mitzvahs, right? No question about that. And you need to have, I have a little bit of Yekish blood, right? Do you know that every single Friday night, shuls are enhanced over the past 500 years with the poem of Lechadodi? It's beautiful. Chadodi likrat kala. Now, it showed up 500 years ago. And when it started gaining popularity in Europe, many shuls said, of course, The Germans in general said, absolutely not. Right? It wasn't done in the past. It wasn't done by the Zayda. Forget it. Goodbye. We're not doing it. Absolutely not. Some shuls actually made an adjustment that the rule was, and in Tells they followed it, that usually the tefillot were led from the amud, from the front of the sanctuary. For L'chadodi, they would do it from the bima just to show that it is new and separate. In other words, but the yekis, until the 19th century, many communities said, we're not doing it. Now, on the one hand, that would appear to be a very stubborn group of people. On the other hand, there's a contribution there, because I could study it and I could start realizing it is important to know what's fundamental and what's new. If I want to study history, if everyone would be as flexible and tolerant as the non-yekis, how would I know what is original and what's not? Everyone makes a contribution. This is something that is extremely fundamental to our Jewish being, like when it comes to slichos. I have my own issue with slichos. We're far enough from high holiday season that I could talk about it, because everyone will forget by the time Elul comes. But slichos needs fixing, in my opinion. The slichos needs fixing. They're long, the language is difficult, we run through it. Tisha B'Av, we did a fixing here in this shul. We're not the only ones that we don't say all the kinos on Tisha B'Av. But what we do is we say some of them and explain. Benefit is we actually relate to what's being said. Slichos needs a fixing, in my opinion. Why? So much of it is said. Now, when did I have an inspiring slichos? I once went to a Sephardi slichos. It was a trip to Israel, and they repeat every single night, and they have a whole month of it, by the way. The exact same thing. The exact same. Right?
Everybody sings
And
it.
everyone sings it. And it's a few simple words. And it's said with passion, right? And I think to myself, that is a contribution, right? I may not be, but everyone is making their contribution. No question about it, okay? Now, obviously we could, the list could continue about all people, but even about Hungarians, by the way. Think about the fanciness, right? In other words, the policeman in Borough Park, there's a true story that for 4 decades served the community, and then when he retired, he said, there's one question I have from the Jewish community, what's the religious significance of the chandelier? He wanted to know. So, obviously, there's something about Hungarian Jewry, but the contribution of feeling important and good about our tradition comes from a lot of the contribution from the Hungarian. I'll stop right now. So, reality is every single group of us, we are making a contribution to the whole, right? Those who have a passion for Eretz Yisrael, right? The passion that you see in Eretz Yisrael by some, extremely inspiring. Those that have passion to the study of Torah and not to adjust, they inspire us as well. Everyone makes a contribution, and here we have one of those incredible statements that the Tanakh wants us to be aware of. Every member, every tribe gave 50, but for them, that 50 was their way of showing this is my temple. Altogether, it's a 600, so it's like the Machzis HaShekel makes it into a whole nation. Temple Mount, how much did it cost? In the days of David, and David HaMelech, he told every tribe, it's your temple. Feel it's yours, because you have to understand and appreciate your contribution and continue focusing on it, focusing on knowing who you are, what you are about, what your nature is, and how that can make an incredible contribution to the people of Israel. Later on, the record tells us, by the way, it cost really not 50, because everyone owns it, it's a 600. That is how we view the temple. It belongs to everyone. It belongs to everyone. And now we can understand, says Maimonides, you want to know why we conceal the location of the temple? Maimonides is addressing the question. Locations are spelled out throughout the Torah. Hamakom, hamakom, hamakom. This most important location for us is hamakom. Writes the Rambam, Ve'asher lo hitba'er b'Torah ve'lo nizkar befrat. You wonder why the Torah does not spell out the location of where the Beit HaMikdash is? So he says, and he gives three reasons, but I'll focus on the significant one. So he tells us that if the Torah would tell us that the future Bet HaMikdash is in a specific location, what would happen would be is Haya Nofel HaMachloket VeHaktata. Big fight. Every tribe feels, meaning the healthy approach to the diversity is to realize everyone's making a contribution. The unhealthy approach to diversity is to believe that the way you think and your approach, that's the only truth. Only I have the truth, right? Because I have this Rebbe, so therefore I'm a carrier of the truth. Because I come from a specific region in Europe, therefore I'm a carrier of the truth. And therefore the temple, what do you mean the temple is going to be in that region? The temple has to be, the Bet HaMikdash has to be where my tribe is. Writes the Rambam. Therefore, the Torah conceals the location. And the commandment to build the Bet HaBchira only occurs after they have a melech that unifies them. When we are unified, when we are one, then we can go ahead and have a Bet HaMikdash. Why? When you are viewed as 12 tribes who happen to be living in similar ways, it's going to be a churban. When we have one unit, welcome to a nation worthy of placing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now we could turn back to that medrash, by the way. The stones, the good news is the stones did not fight, right? The bad news is that the stones, which symbolize the 12 stones that Yaakov gathers, symbolize the tribes. Every single one deep down felt, I'm worthy of hosting the temple. What happened is that they became one unit. They get a king, and we all say David Melech Yisrael. When they become one unit, so this is what the Medrash is telling us. The Medrash is telling us that to keep in, when you have the tribes of Israel as separate units, you're going to have a machlokes. You're going to have disputes. Forget about unity. When they become one, then you can have the head of Yaakov Avinu placed there and indeed have a temple. So this is a significant section for an understanding of what Medrash is about, and understanding about why this location was concealed. No tribe should walk away eyeing it, because only when we are one united nation can the location actually be spelled out. So that's this piece of information. But now we have to understand the Hanukkah aspect. Now, the Haftorah of the first Shabbat, we'll have more opportunity at Hanukkah, but it just fits in with regarding one detail here. There's an Haftorah we read on the first Shabbos of Hanukkah that talks about a nation that is overwhelmed. It's the nation of Israel returning after the Babylonian exile, granted permission to rebuild the temple, but then what happened is that the permit was revoked. It's the Middle East after all, and you want to rely on Cyrus. Guess what? Cyrus might be Cyrus the Great, but Cyrus the Great was the one who also withdrew the permission, and the nation is going through difficulty, great difficulty adjusting to it. And we talk about, so there's an Haftorah that we read about that has an image of the menorah. We talked about this in the past. But the last verse of that Haftorah is, you should know, now the players, the significant authorities who led the nation during this difficult period of time, as they are trying to restart the process of building, are not Ezra and Nehemiah, they show up later, but rather two personalities that we know less of. One of them is Yehoshua Kohen HaGadol, and one of them is a fellow by the name of Zerubbabel. Okay? Zerubbabel plays a role in getting the nation back together. Eventually he makes his way back to Babel. Yehoshua Kohen Gadol has his own personal issues because his children intermarried. And this was the challenge of the time. And the text calls him someone that is wearing filthy clothes because of it. But even though he is flawed, the angel says to Zechariah, don't be critical of him, because he is an Ud Mutzal Me'esh. What does that mean? Meaning he's a survivor, right? And if he survived difficulty, you're not allowed to be critical of anyone that survived difficulty. This is what the prophet and the Almighty, and an important message perhaps for this generation as well. So now the prophet turns to the nation and says the following: worry not, because even though the Persian Empire seems like this almighty and all-powerful nation, mi ata har hagadol lifnei Zerubbabel. In other words, that when the people of Israel are doing what they should do, the greatest of mountains are not a challenge. So this is a very encouraging statement, because this har gadol, you know what it could turn into? A mishor, like a plain. Okay? And people of Israel, worry not. The process of rebuilding the temple will continue. The process of the rebuilding will continue after the break. And it's going to start with taking out vehotzi et ha'even harosha. They're going to go ahead and take out the main stone. And everyone's going to go ahead and say, oh, how beautiful it is. Shuot, what are they going to say? Chen chen la. Chen chen is such a beautiful stone, right? The stone. Even harosha. This is what we are told. So this is the end of this Hanukkah statement. You're going through difficulty. The nation of Israel doesn't see a path to begin this process of rebuilding. There's going to be an Even harosha. Now, when did that occur? When exactly did this the restart of the process of building occur? So there's a book called Chagai, and in the book of Chagai, which is taking place at the same time, and he tells the people of Israel, listen, you start building, you'll see good things happening. Start the building, it doesn't look like a good time. Believe me, it's going to occur, and you'll see suddenly a blessing. Everything that is going wrong is going to suddenly be going right. And there's a date. And the date that Chagai tells us, and he says to them, people of Israel, Simu na levavchem. In other words, put your attention, says Chagai. Mina yom hazeh v'mala. From this day on, everything is going to go right. Because, 18 years ago you tried and it did not succeed. Now you are deeply concerned from starting again, because the empire doesn't seem to be supportive and we don't seem ready for it, and a few people return. Nothing is going right. Chagai says, don't worry, because when you start on this day, and remember this day, from this point on, everything will go right. Miyom esrim ve'arba latchi'i. From the 24th day, meaning the day they put the stone to restart this process, the stone of encouragement, the stone of a future that occurred on the 24th day of the 9th month. Kislev. What day of Kislev?
Day before Hanukkah.
Chaf Dalet Kislev. And if you remember from the beginning of the class, that is actually the day that they walked into the temple on the day of the Maccabees. They walked into the temple on that day. That is it's one of the reasons, by the way, we celebrate Hanukkah, for what occurred in this verse. And based on that, say the authorities like the Radak, that when we are told, V'hotzieta even harosha, back to the Haftarah of Hanukkah, when we are told we're going to take out the stone, this main stone, and begin the process, Rosha. What comes to mind? Even Rosha. Yaakov's
Stone.
Rosh. What was Yaakov's head? What was the stone of Yaakov? It is the stone of unity. In other words, when you want to get into the spirit of Hanukkah, is the donuts important, and the candles, and the gifts, all the gute Sachen, but you have to realize it is a time that we focus on Even Rosha, the time when we feel that we are one unit, right? There's a story that's shared that, during the early 19th century, there was a lot of fighting in communities due to the development of the Hasidic movement. There were people that were very, very passionate about their Hasidic roots, people very passionate about their non-Hasidic roots, and it seems to be that overall, we're over that. We don't really have good fights anymore. That's a reality, right? Like shuls, things flying, changing, those things are gone. So they went to a Rebbe, and he gave the mashal, the following story, that there was a wealthy person who had 2 daughters, and he wanted to marry them off to Torah scholars, so he married. So the commitment to the first one was obviously a nice dira, a nice apartment, a nice car, and he had to support the son-in-law that every single day he gets 2 fleishik meals. Okay, now fine, the son-in-law wants it, you give it, and then there was another. The second daughter shows up, also the best guy in Lakewood, and but his demand, believe it or not, is to have every single day 2 milchik meals.
Vegetarian.
Milchik, oh, we'll get there. Milchik meals, fine. Okay, so he has to take care of him. The problem is that he never was able to have them together at the same meal. Right? That was a problem. Eventually, the gvir loses his money, right? And he couldn't afford the fleishiks. That we can relate to. He couldn't afford the milchiks, because it was Chol Yisrael. So what was he stuck with? Beans, parv. So the sad thing was that the kids were eating beans, but the beauty was they're sitting together. And so too, the Rebbe's like, when it comes to the 20th century, we've lost the passion. Like the passion of the Hasidim, it's not the same level of the early days. The passion of those who are against. But the beauty is that when we have lost the passion, at least we could come together as a nation. And Hanukkah is that holiday when it is indeed a darker time, where we don't have the illumination, we don't have the chagim, but it's a time that, yes, we celebrate it when there's quote-unquote darkness, and there's the challenge, and there's the long nights, but we come together, and it is indeed a holiday, a time when you feel we're in a high spirit, and I'm not only giving credits to the malls, and that we have to combat all the jingles that are maching us mishuga every single time we walk into a store, but it is an uplifting time, the Hanukkah, and it's an uplifting time when we have an Even Roshah, when we have a stone of unity that really is what brings about Jewish celebration. So that should be the beginning of our Hanukkah journey. We thank our sponsors, Neshama should have an aliyah, and we thank everyone for coming. We'll see you Bezrat Hashem next week.
Good.